here. Don't
The
run.
day after Labor Day, we survived Hermine, or however she wanted her name pronounced, and ended up with great weather for those of us that were able to go to the coast. It made it very hard to come back this morning. Dr. Conley is going to be addressing us in a few minutes, but I got a comment. I'm not a bow tie fan, but that bow tie I need for my first Carolina football game.
I put on a red one, you know.
That is really, really neat. So I could wear that and sit in our wine and cheese crowd and feel right at home.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
We have only 2 items today, but they're both important items. Both of them may create lots of questions, but we're going to need to stay on time. So as we're asking our questions today, keep in mind, be mindful of the time. I already have my pad of paper. I would encourage you to particularly be ready to jot down notes to remind you. And when you do send them to staff, if you copy the rest of the board members, it keeps the communication flowing. So with that being said, Dr. Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Benton, board members, Dr. Merrill. Today we're sharing work that a cross-departmental team has done to consider innovative models that could inform the development of future curricular programs. Because 4 board members were not present during the Student Achievement Committee, we thought it would be best to return the unchanged presentation from Student Achievement Committee. We did receive some feedback from board members during that July 11th meeting. And as noted in the discussion with the board members at that Student Achievement Committee meeting, these programs, possible programs, could be implemented within existing schools as programs or small academies within existing schools, or enhancements to existing program themes within schools. So the work at this point is in the really early developmental stages and has been shared today only as an example of what a model might look like should we proceed with looking at models. And again, we're going to share some examples of possible themes that could be considered. One of them, we're going to share a template with you with the types of things that we would explore should we want to look at one of these things more in-depthly, or more in-depth. We've developed these rough concept models so that staff would have a starting point for programs should properties become available within the SNAP process, or other opportunities become available within the normal capital development process. These will be a starting point for discussion for looking at possible models or possible concepts for staff to explore much further or deeper should we go in that direction. So today it's just about a high-level overview. So we're going to walk through some of the themes that we looked at and considered for possible exploration, and then one of the themes we're going to share the types of things we want to look at more deeply should we go forward in any of them.
Okay. One of the minor adjustments we made since the last student achievement presentation was to provide a little bit of background context on the process. So as Dr. Conley mentioned, we did assemble a cross-departmental team of approximately 25 people. We met 11 times over 12 weeks, and you'll see some of the departments and teams that were represented in these initial planning stages. Throughout this process, we reviewed innovative models that have been noted in literature based on innovative use of pedagogical approaches, technology, time, setting. We also reviewed career development and employment trend information. We had a presentation from the Capital Area Workforce Development Board. We looked at data from Wake County Economic Development, and we also consulted the work of Tony Wagner, who you all had an opportunity to hear from during our initial visioning stage for the district's current strategic plan in summer of 2014.
I do want to add too that in terms of looking at the different data sources, it's a very cursory look. We didn't go deeply in any of them, but just an initial look at some of the data from the sources that Angie has noted. But should we go deeper or further with any of these particular models, we obviously would do a lot more research and study.
So throughout this process, the team looked at the models. We consulted the literature. We took the experience of the members of the team and the knowledge of Wake County, and then based on consensus of the team, we settled upon some themes and models that we're going to be talking about in just a couple of minutes. We agreed as that we go as we went throughout the process, there would be some specific pieces that we would have to build out in more detail on each theme, and you see some of those things noted there, such as mission, particular targets, goals, focus area, and logistics. And of course, aligning to the strategic plan. As a result of that, the team did, through consensus, settle upon 6 sample models that we wanted to explore in a bit more detail. Julie Crane is now going to provide just a high-level overview of 5 out of the 6 themes, and then Kathy Moore is going to go into a bit more detail into one of the themes that we spent some additional time on exploring in more detail, so that we would have a sense of what the process would be like if we did want to build out a theme in more detail.
All right, so for each of the models that I'm going to present to you today, the 5 that we're going to give this broader overview, we're going to sample some national, local, and state level data that might just give sort of a broad brush context for why a model like this might work here. Okay, so first is a design school concept. We have some national and local data here from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The top 30 jobs projected by the years 2020 and 2024 include jobs which rely heavily upon things like construction, carpentry, masonry, green construction, etc. And then we have some local data that talk about the number of jobs that exist in Wake County and the growth of those job sectors in the upcoming years. So you will see, for example, 4,449 construction laborers in Wake County right now, and over the next 10 years, a need for 2,500 more. A possible mission for that school or program might be to prepare students for success in college and career with industry exposure via business and university partnerships, thereby allowing students to model innovative and entrepreneurial practices in the areas of design. For an education model, the broad context includes state and local data. The local data we swim in every day in our schools and at the district level. Statewide data, based on the North Carolina Association of Workforce Development, educational services was among the most often cited industry with hiring difficulties. A proposed or possible mission or program for a school like this would be to prepare future educators, or school or program, to prepare future educators by engaging a wide range of students in various aspects of the educational profession, including some detailed aspects there that we laid before you. Next, a model that had some interest among our group was a farm school or farm program. National, state, and local data here in the broad context. Again, according to the North Carolina Association of Workforce Development and Forbes magazine, where we get the national approach here, food prep and service occupations are some of the most among the fastest growing jobs. We currently have about 367 farmers in Wake County, and over the next 10 years there's a need for 265 additional through growth and replacement. So the farm and agricultural industry is a sector for growth. A potential mission for a school or program in this theme would be to combine academics, hands-on activities, and service in a learning and working farm or food-based community committed to sustainable resources, environmental responsibility, cross-cultural understanding, and personal growth. The next model we took a look at was based on the grand challenges of engineering. You may have heard of the grand challenges before. They were developed by the National Academy of Engineers, or National Academy of Engineering. And the context, the data points that we have here to provide this broad brush context for you, comes from national, state, and local levels. Again, the North Carolina Association for Workforce Development Board cited architecture and engineering occupations were the second most frequently noted for hiring difficulties in North Carolina. We have 14 wind turbine technicians in Wake County, and there's a need for 27 more. That's a very minute, very focused area, but it gives you some idea of a job sector that's going to grow. Under the mission for a possible school or program, we would prepare students to collaborate, innovate, and solve current and future complex global problems organized around the 14 grand challenges of engineering to become leaders, architects, and entrepreneurs of research and service learning. These grand challenges include advanced personalized learning, engineered tools of scientific discovery, other items. There are teenagers across the nation and internationally who are developing tests for pancreatic cancer. There's a sophomore in high school who's developed a test for pancreatic cancer in Maryland. And in Virginia, there's a student who was then a senior, now is a PhD student, who developed an early test for Lyme disease as a high school senior. And a 16-year-old Canadian teen has developed a paper-based test, blood test, to detect heart disease like arterial plaque deposits. So our high school students can really grasp and achieve in these areas. An intergenerational program or school. At the national and local level, we know that as our population ages, we need more intergenerational programming. And there is some data that shows that youth involved in intergenerational programming improve academic performance, enhance their social skills, and develop many positive relationships to civic attitudes and behaviors. A mission for a program or school like this might be to develop an intergenerational community of lifelong learners and spirited, productive citizens at all ages. So those are 5. We wanted to walk you through what a broad brush context and mission might be. And Kathy's going to take you through a more detailed approach to what one of these models might look like now.
So as the group sort of met and narrowed down some things that, the work that had gone across the 11 meetings, one of the programs that we looked at and thought, so let's take a look at one of the programs a little bit more closely and look at what the dimensions might be of exploring it further to see how it might build itself out, to help us understand how we might do that with other models if we choose to move forward. So we went a little further with the public safety model. This is one where there was a considerable amount of energy, and there were several models that existed in other districts that we could take a look at to see how they had opened up this program and what it looked like there that informed our discussion. So when we look at, for example, a little further, when we look at the context for public safety, a lot of fast-growing areas, because public safety is a broad swath here. There's lots of things that could be a part of this. Emergency medical technicians, paramedics, there's firefighters, there's a number of different areas that you could, even law enforcement, where this could apply depending on how far we wanted to go. And in particular, as we reached out to a couple of folks in the community to just sort of touch the temperature on this, we got quite quickly an immediate response for some of these things that they felt like they would want to do something like this tomorrow. We already do have some programs that start some of this work in some of our schools, but how much further we might go or what other arenas we might go into intentionally became the focus of how we looked at this. And emergency medical techs, a tremendous need. And then in North Carolina, we also looked at, for example, with firefighters, the fact that we have a reducing population in terms of folks that are going into that as a profession as well. And so that was part of the context there. Additional context we looked at was information about the fact that agencies had trouble filling some of the vacancies. And then we did reach out we do have an example, for example, right now that's already going on with Wake Forest. They have an Explorer program that they have in their schools. That's something that's already going on. I think another example would be Garner High School with a firefighter academy that they have at their school. So we have some inroads into some of this already. And is there an appetite for more, and what might that look like?
We're going to show that.
You're going to show a video of it? Okay.
Yeah.
Police officers will tell you it's not a job you decide to do on a whim. It's a job you want. For those who know at a young age, there's a career development program through the Boy Scouts that gets them ready. For 2 years, Matthew Becker has been a law enforcement explorer. It's taking him one step closer to his dream of becoming a Wake Forest police officer.
I loved every second of it because every day and meeting that I come to, I learned so much from the explorers. Thanks to these officers that come and help us.
Here, the group is having a fundraiser selling water and soda at Wake Forest Friday Night on White music series. The explorers meet twice a month for classroom and practical training. If they're old enough, they get to do ride-alongs with the officers.
See firsthand that it's not all just, driving fast and arresting people. There's a lot of behind the scenes. There's a lot of public relations part of law enforcement that they get to learn.
There is so much to learn and possibly sacrifice, as was evidenced by the events in Dallas. But young Matthew is undeterred.
It's just interests me so much how all the police officers, what they do for our country, and I sort of want to be one of them and to actually help citizens out on a daily basis.
He's so exuberant. And interesting to note, Sergeant Bidding was an explorer as well. He credits the program with helping him become an officer. Police officers will tell you it's not a job you decide to do on.
So as a part of that, we were able to socialize this idea with a couple of folks in the community, because obviously we have firefighters and law enforcement and EMTs right here, and some of the programs that are already underway. And in all of those cases, when we just sort of did an initial outreach to see how those folks might respond, they were very supportive and very interested in, should we go down this road pursuing some sort of a collaborative partnership that would grow this. When you look at a potential mission, the group that met for 11 weeks brainstormed possible missions for schools. And this was, a lot of the work here was about this whole student apprentice model for careers in public safety, and then the different opportunities that there are for that. And that it include academics as well as practical career training, attitude development, fitness, discipline, all of those different components that go into successful public sector jobs. When we looked at some grade span here, we knew that we had several options to look at. Those are decisions that loom on the horizon. Should we decide to do something? Is this something that's best reserved as a high school program? Is it something that can extend into middle school if you wanted to, and how would you do that? Or is there another model that we might want to take a look at? And in this case, is a 500 student model something that we would do if it were a standalone school? Is it something, what would the size be supported if it were an academy within a school? I think in this particular case, public safety was a little bit bigger than that, unless you split it out to different schools. So that would be something that we'd have to decide, if you're doing all of those in one location, or if you're splitting them out as academies or programs to different schools. A little bit further, why would we want to do this? We would know that for any school that we'd want to develop, we'd want to look at goals, or the goals of the program or the academy. So we want to create a pipeline of talent for this need in our community, and that we would want to partner with the community for this on-the-job training in the real-world hands-on experiences that kids could have. In this case, those would be two very appropriate goals for the program. The kinds of things that we would want to focus on, initially when we talked about what does public safety mean, and in all cases for any program, we'd have to figure out, okay, what does it mean? Can any one program really focus on all 14 grand challenges? Public safety, how do we want to narrow, what are our areas? We look particularly at fire service, EMTs, and then the criminal justice area that involves a number of places where that could fit in. Going a little bit further in terms of the focus areas, you dig a little deeper and you say, okay, well, what does it take to be a successful firefighter, EMT, that sort of thing. And we came up with things like the hands-on, the project-based learning would be important, Spanish for public service, the different kinds of ideas that we threw out that would be components possibly of moving forward. And this is an example of what we'd have to do with every single program, whatever it would look like. Moving further into logistics, anytime that you do a program like this, if it's a school, you have to look at what would the calendar be like, or the bell schedule or staffing, facility, funding, transportation, all of those are logistics. And even if it's an academy or a program within a school, you still have some of those same logistics that you have to deal with, especially when you're partnering with community organizations. So again, for public safety, that was one of the models that we took a little further into development to help us sort of practice with what it might look like if we had to do that for numerous programs. And because in this particular case, we had the ability to get some quick feedback from some community partners about what this might look like.
So again, staff is not really seeking next steps at this time. We just wanted to start getting some ideas and concepts together in our heads as a team to be prepared with some sorts of concept ideas should a future opportunity present itself. Should the board be supportive of exploring these types of models, we'll reach out to the community to determine community interest, community need in these types of areas. Should an opportunity to come forward that we need to have some kind of concept to start from, and not start from scratch, but have an idea that we've already taken a look at. That concludes our presentation.
All right. Questions and comments? Ms. Cushing.
Well, I was not at the Student Achievement Committee, so I appreciated getting an update today. Someone, one of the commissioners actually recently asked me, how does the school system, given the flavor of the day in education, right, and the trends that are in education, but also our limited resources, how do you pick how to have programs, what innovations to put in? And so I'm glad to see, my answer to him was that we have a strategic plan, and if it fits in this, that's going to be our foundation. So I was really glad to see that is what's driving a lot of the conversations that y'all have had around these models. So my one question was about, I guess, on-ramps for students. So say if we have an academy in a school or a separate school that has a program, say a rising ninth grader may not recognize they have an interest in this program. We found that in some of our academies. Or are we thinking through strategies that we can both allow for a full, students to have a full experience or to get an on-ramp after ninth grade? I don't need an answer today, I'm just.
Yeah.
It's really deeper than this work went. I mean, this is very high level of surface. Those sorts of things we have to hammer down.
Right.
And we might start on one of these and start that and say, we can't figure this out.
I'm just raising
So-
it.
oh.
One issue I would,
Tons of questions
Right.
related to
related to that,
implementation.
yes.
Yeah.
Just raising it. Thanks.
Okay. Additional questions, comments?
That's good. I haven't heard it described as.
Yeah. I'm
Are
sorry.
these programs, are these the types of programs that the state often funds through their cooperative and innovative programs?
Some of them maybe, but not really. The cooperative innovative would require that you align yourself with a community college program. So to the extent that there are community college programs or university programs aligned to these themes, then you could do something like that. But in some cases, we weren't as narrow as looking at only cooperative innovative when the group met, because magnet themes, academies, all of those things are options that would not necessarily fit into a cooperative innovative model.
Okay. Ms. Johnson-Hostler?
Similar along those lines, and I wasn't going to ask a question, but you prompted me because I can't think of the name of it, but some of our state agencies have federal dollars for apprentice programs, like Department of Transportation. I know some of theirs were engineering. I've not looked at this in years, so I'm not sure if it still exists, but I know that they were particularly, DOT was getting money federally to look at apprenticeship programs in schools. And I don't know if that money is still coming through the pipelines, but just a thought, especially around the grand challenges, because I know some of theirs were engineering.
Again, we haven't looked deeply at it, but certainly as we reach out to agencies on any one of these models, that would be one of the things we want to explore is what opportunities do they have, what programming do they have that we could partner with. But again, that would be steps down the road that we would look at.
Mr. Fletcher?
I think something that I'm would hope to learn more about is if we're looking at where a program like this might be initiated, and if it's driven from a facility availability or lack thereof, as the case may be, then I'm wanting to understand more about whether it's a small comprehensive high school, or whether it's a half-day program, or whether it's a place you go to. I'm just, how it works from an instructional standpoint. Student leaves us with a Wake County diploma, qualifying them to take a lot of avenues when they leave us. And so I'm trying to figure out how does this thinking complement that requirement, or is that a requirement? So some more, some thoughts as we move forward on that would be very helpful, and I think provide some clarity to several board members about just what does this animal look like, and two, what we've experienced. We've had a couple of iterations at Vernon Malone where we didn't have ninth grade, now we have ninth grade. Does it have the comprehensive academic program that some applicants thought it had? Does it have more requirements than some applicants thought it had, et cetera? And what can we learn from that and apply to this conceptual model? Because those things are going to be critical for the board to understand making a decision. And my memory tells me that we are into this conversation because we had a facility and we said, we think we can do a 1,200 student program here, what would it look like? And then we now wound up not buying that facility, but that was a spark that initiated this. There may have been others, but that was a spark that initiated some of this work. And so I'm appreciative of the work. I also have some questions about it. I can see public safety going lots of different ways. Biotech and all kinds of things in terms of, everybody wants to be a CSI,
Still popular.
and how does that, what are the opportunities to explore a science through a forensic lens, if you will. Things like that could be very appealing to certain students. So I'm happy with where we're going. I'm just wanting a little more.
Please share some of those with the staff in emails.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm definitely supportive of continuing to look at these programs because I think they're great. And I know you've got to gel out a lot of things and come back to us, and I'm sure some people have better questions for you than I possibly could. But I think also after you get that community support to really look at what students want to do. Some students know what they want to do. I want to be a teacher. Future teachers of America. I have students every year that I taught that they want to be firemen, and their only avenue is to become a volunteer, to volunteer fire departments. And so when they get to spend the night in the firehouse or the fire station for the first time, they are just ecstatic. And the same thing like Matthew Becker said, he has this passion to be a policeman. And some people who have those passions, they develop very early and continue.
There was, years ago, when my children were very young, we visited the NC State Vet Open House. And my daughter had expressed some interest in vet school at one point in time. I think there are probably a lot of young ladies who do. And I talked with somebody in the admissions department. I said, well, why is your summer school program only aimed at fifth graders and not middle school students? And they said, because our research just tells us that's when they make up their minds.
My question is, what kind of process will be used to determine what, if any, of these are implemented, and are they more appropriate for an academy, a magnet program, a standalone? How do we reach that? What do you foresee as the process to help us get there? Because I have an interest, a great interest in this, as most of you are aware. But again, our continuum of offerings of kids, and throw into that what's the smallest comprehensive high school we can have. All that sort of fits in together. So how do we? How are we getting there?
Well, as Ms. Felton said, everything from student interest surveys, even the exploratory wheel that students do in middle school. So looking at student interest, looking at community need, looking at what does the job market say the jobs will be, several years from now. So looking at all of that data very deeply and then compiling it and then taking a look at, okay, so what does Wake County Public School System need to do now to help meet that need? So a lot of work would need to be done to look at, interests of students, interest in the community agencies and their interests, what potential partnerships might there be. So all the work that you saw, the things we would look at, those are just examples of a lot of work that would need to be done to narrow down, okay, what might be an opportunity for us.
Is Wake Tech involved in a formal way yet? I know in talking with Dr. Scott, he seems to be intensely interested in this concept, but are we in that point yet?
We've not had a specific conversation with Wake Tech at this point, but they did see the presentation that we did at Student Achievement. Similarly, some of the law enforcement officers, chiefs of police, saw the presentation we did at Student Achievement. So there are folks who are interested in having further conversation with us across the different models.
If I could add, we are not down any road on this. And this is a look across the horizon and say, okay, if there's a number of opportunities that might be available, what might they be based on a number of factors? That's about as far as we've gone. And I don't know that I'd put a lot more work into this unless you guys really charge us on something. We wanted to have some concepts available that if an opportunity or challenge presented itself, we could go to and start cranking it up. I also hear, I think on this, that the board's very interested in remaining involved on how this gets grown or decided or whatever. And so while that's a little non-traditional, what I hear from you on this is front end, in the loops, representation, whatever, I think.
I think until we're all more comfortable just where it's going, yeah.
Right. But right now, I mean, the emergency brake's on, because we didn't intend to go any farther than this. I mean, our intent only was to say, okay, here's some possibilities out there. And if, a building like this pops up again, or Betty walks in and says, boy, have I got a deal for you, then we say, well, let's consider something, and then bring something back and say, do you want us to proceed with something? So, that's all we intended to get done with this.
And I
can certainly answer more
just
questions.
me, not the board, would like to think that we don't have the emergency brake on, but we're definitely in first gear.
Idle? Would you take idle?
Maybe even idle.
I don't drive a stick shift.
I'd like to be in first gear, but that's just me.
It's a human capital commitment also, and there's so many other things we're on. This hasn't necessarily risen to that level yet that we're starting to dedicate manpower to it.
Okay. All right, closing comments, questions? Don't forget, please, Marvin, my understanding is you really want to hear additional questions and feedback.
Feel free to email us any or suggestions of things you want us to take a look at if you want us to go forward at all.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now the fun topic.
It's the most wonderful day of the year.
That's pretty good.
Great. Off-ramp also.
Every taxpayer this often today they celebrate. We're being good stewards of our capital assets that we've been given. That's it.
But does that get messy with scheduling?
Well, with hiring and
There was something else.
it depends how much.
With block schedule, couldn't a 10th grader
Later.
take
Okay,
the 9th grade
here
course
we
and
go
10th grade?
with our first look at a draft. And can I stress to media, draft. This is not the plan. It's the first time the board has been introduced as a board to see what the thoughts of our student enrollment people are, with help from our friends at NC State. And there will be lots of opportunities for us to weigh in, the public to weigh in. It's the first step of a months long process.
Could have said it better. Right. This is year 3 of a multi-year enrollment plan. So while we do one enrollment plan per year, we do it with the horizon before us around our commitments and future plans for building schools. So everything that you see, and you'll see it as you go through it, what we've got money for, what we've got land for, and what we've got penciled in based on needs that have been identified. So Laura and Glenn are here. I think Glenn is going to drive today. And again, this is draft 1, and you'll see in the timeline as we get into it a little bit further that it is in fact several months.
Okay. And this is all about growth, and if you remember the last time we met in May, Laura threw in a photo of a cat being born. So I just wanted to make sure that you didn't add in anything to this presentation. I think she did have new ducks recently, right?
Yeah. Our turkey,
No photos?
our turkey hatched out ducks. But moving on.
So it's all about growth. So looking at over the last 10 years, you've got student growth is about 30,000 students over the last 10 years, with projected growth another 13,000 students for the next 5 years. Just going to show that this is a great place to live. It's continuing that way. Okay, so where is all this growth happening? You can see in the red areas right here, these are the planning regions, the west-north, the southwest, and the near east. And as you can see, they've shown the largest net gain from 2012 to present. And it just so happens to be that we are opening schools in these 2 areas in 17-18, and actually in all 3 areas in 16-17 that we just opened. So getting to the new schools. So thanks to the communities that have funded CIP 2013, we have these schools outlined in green here that are in the multi-year funding plan. 2 years ago, we opened up 3 new schools, and then we opened up 6 schools this current school year. The schools that we'll be focusing on are right here in blue: Hortons Creek Elementary, Rogers Lane Elementary, Riverbend Middle School, and a CTE High School. And then looking ahead, which is what we always do, even though it's one year that we're focusing on, we do look ahead to take that into consideration. In 18-19, we've got 4 schools potentially opening, and then a 5th school here that's pushed out to 19-20. That is Green Level High School. That's because it's going to be a swing space for the renovations at Apex High School for 2 years. Down here in the bottom, we have these gray schools outlined in red. These are schools that have not yet been funded, but we are considering those because they are on the horizon. We have some acquired sites, and we have to consider those as we look each individual year. So we're taking those into account.
They have been planned, and they are part of a comprehensive capital plan.
That
Just
has
the-
been given to the commission.
Right, it has been, and has been passed by the commission.
Into their.
So putting those on a map, this is what it looks like. You've got your blue schools, the ones that we're going to be talking about today that are opening in 17-18. Your red schools here, proposed for 18-19, and then again the purple school for 19-20. The gray are again the unfunded but planned, and then we also have these circles of schools where we still need to acquire land for those areas. All right. So getting into the 4 new schools that are opening in 17-18, we've got Hortons Creek out here in the west, Rogers Lane in the near east by 440, just north of that along 540, Riverbend Middle School, and then up here in the Wakefield area we have the CTE High School. Now that school does not have a base attendance area, it's going to be an application-only school, so we won't really be discussing that too much further from here.
I assume though that there are targeted schools. Is it just open, or are we trying to pull down enrollment at particular schools?
Well, we haven't fully fleshed that out yet either. We've got some decisions looming around what makes sense.
And when I say targeted, that often means there's heavier recruiting efforts,
Correct.
and those students might get some level of priority,
Yeah,
but we're not too
there's variations on a theme around targets, priorities, transportation. There's lots of different ways to slice that.
Can you refresh our mind how large that one is going to be?
It's
Is it
smaller. It's smaller than Vernon Malone because the footprint is
Right.
smaller. So we're looking around 500 kids, 5 or 6 programs. I can't remember. A few less than we have at Vernon Malone.
Okay. So moving on to the timeline. And this timeline actually started back in February when you had your
Oh, wait,
retreat.
hold on, I'm sorry then. Back up to the thing with schools, H13 in Willow Springs. Is that when it's 2021, is that when it's open for Willow Springs, or will it actually open before that and have Fuquay High School in it?
It opens in 2019 for Fuquay Marina.
Okay.
That's what.
Well, I didn't want
for
people
Fuquay
down in
Marina.
Fuquay to see that and think we pushed them out 2
Right.
more years.
Right. Well, I mean, we could maybe put an X in the year that the building's actually ready. That just begs the explanation of
Right.
recognizing that it's being used for something else
Right.
until it's actually got its own base.
I think that might help everybody.
Because it's the same thing with South Gardner. South
Put the
Gardner
word
is
swing,
shown.
That's what I was
put the
gonna
word
say, South
swing
Gardner's
in the
good.
block or
Right.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. South Gardner is shown as 1819, but it's actually, as you know,
Right.
built and in
Right.
operation for this year and next for Gardner High. So,
And same with Green Level, the building will actually
Yeah.
be
Right.
ready in 17.
So if you can figure out a way to show that in a clear way on the
Okay.
chart, that would be helpful, I think.
So getting into the timeline, back in May, we met with you to review the needs and get some feedback for draft 1. Today is September 6th, and we're presenting draft 1 to you now, and the online forums are going to be open for the public to start to provide feedback. Throughout September, we're going to be meeting with board advisory committees, and we've already got a couple scheduled already. So if you'd like for us to come to your board advisory committees, just let us know. We'll present draft 1 to them, get feedback as well from the public. Then in October, we'll present draft 2, continue to solicit feedback. Then in October as well, we'll set up community meetings, generally in the areas where the new schools are going to be opening. Solicit more feedback, and then in November, December, present draft 3, the final draft from staff, turn it over to you, and then let you finish out with your public hearings, your work session, and then final approval. Okay, so policy 4100, okay, aside from growth, this is what drives our creation of the draft. You have the 4 pillars there. Student achievement, where we look to minimize high concentrations of low-performing and low-income students at each school. Stability, where we allow students the opportunity to stay at the same school without experiencing involuntary changes in assignment. Unfortunately, when we open new schools, we will need to move some students to alleviate the crowding at those schools in that area, though. Proximity, base schools will be within a reasonable distance from the student's home, and it's not always the closest home. There's not a lot of factors that we can't control, so therefore it can't always be the closest school to a student's home, but it is within reasonable distance.
And I think that's important for us to stress, because I get parents who call and say, well, I go by 1 school, 2 schools, 3 schools. The idea was never, now y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but back when we were adopting this policy, we never intended the closest, particularly when we talk about elementary schools that are really clustered tightly in some places, but we wanted the school to be reasonably close.
Well, people don't live in nice circles,
Right.
equidistant from the middle, which is a school.
Right.
And so we build where we are able to, and based on what the patterns and the growth, you've seen the rings, sometimes we have to increase the size of the ring, so there are a lot of factors.
Children do grow up.
Well, and reasonable is clearly defined locally, right? If you're in a high-density area, reasonable distance means something completely different than if you're in a low-density area. And so we can't draw a line in the sand and say X miles is reasonable distance.
Right.
Okay? And then the last one, operational efficiency, where we're looking to minimize overcrowded and under-enrolled schools, but also maximizing transportation efficiencies. Okay, so there's two parts to creating the first draft. The first part is the computer part, where we put all the information into the computer, it spits out a result, and then we go through it by hand and see if it makes sense, because we don't have that computer that can beat the chess players when we do this. We do have a great computer provided by Mike Miller and ITRI and NC State and ORED. So within that, we put in these 5 bullets: stability, proximity to school, building utilization, anticipated growth, and the impact of future base attendance areas. So stability is, when that computer generates the result, if it's taking 50 students from school A and putting them into school B, and then vice versa, taking 50 from school B and putting them into school A, we're not going to do that. That doesn't make any sense on a realistic level. So therefore, we go through and we'll edit each of those aspects as it comes up. And then again, the impact of the long-term stability, you're going to see some scenarios where we're looking ahead to future schools to determine, do we want to move children now when we may be moving them later on? And so even though it may make sense today, it's something we want to look at down the road. Okay? So again, going through by hand each of those, the district-wide impact. So this is the entire county. You can see the only areas that are impacted on the elementary level are the yellow area here and the yellow area here. That's it. Going back here, this is just the part we did by hand. Did you have any questions about this part? Sorry. So here, these are the only 2 areas that are impacted out of the entire county.
The thing I like to say here is, we're not turning the school district upside down. We're not impacting thousands of children. We're opening 2 new elementary schools, and the proposed changes are right where those new schools are.
Okay. A little bit different for middle schools. We have a middle school that's opening right here, Riverbend Middle School. And we do have some areas here that we're looking to propose some changes to, but that's to improve the operational efficiency and proximity of the students in this area. And this is not a mistake. It's we do not have any changes that we're proposing for high schools for this year, for 17-18. All right, so getting into the schools here. First, we'll start with Hortons Creek. It's going to open as a traditional calendar school. The calendar option we're proposing is Alston Ridge, but we'd like to put that up for discussion, since looking ahead, you have M16, which I'll probably call Alston Ridge Middle School, even though it's not named. That school is set to open as a traditional calendar school in 1920. It's going to open on the same campus as Alston Ridge Elementary, which is a multi-track year-round school. So we'll want some board direction on whether we want to have this as a year-round calendar option for a new school opening in 17-18, or do we want to consider another school? The planned capacity is 780, with a potential impact area of Alston Ridge Elementary. And as you can see here, Hortons Creek lies in the current attendance area for Alston Ridge, and then Mills Park here.
Do you want
Glenn,
questions
can
as
I
we go?
clarify the purpose of our meeting today? Like you said, you're wanting board input on that. Are you wanting it today, or you want us to have a chance to think about this?
So
and
you can
review it?
digest
It
that.
doesn't, I mean, there's 3 drafts,
Yeah.
right? There's 3 drafts, but we knew that the Alston Ridge Elementary as the year-round calendar option for Hortons Creek was tied also to what happens with M16 and the calendar there, and whether or not anything happens with the calendar at Alston Ridge Elementary, and any other options there might be for year-rounds in the area. So this is the staff recommendation, but we would anticipate that to generate some discussion based on the other questions.
Okay.
But that, like I said, doesn't have, I would want you to think about it and ask questions, yes.
Christine?
Well, I was going to ask you, Mr. Chair, do you want us to raise questions now or jot questions down and sort of like the budget process
Well,
we go,
I
have
think
some
this is a
questions for
good time
staff?
for clarifying questions so that we'll understand just what the proposal is. And the deeper questions may
Okay.
come through emails that, again, is shared with staff and board members. And VACs are going to generate some
We're gonna generate.
before we even get to public hearings.
And so just for clarifying, if the calendar option school, well, we've actually talked about traditional calendars not necessarily even having a calendar option, so that is one
Right.
conversation that we need to have. But if we would, if, depending where that conversation would go, what other year-round schools would be in the docket for consideration?
Well, we're actually thinking about Turner Creek,
Mm-hmm.
okay? It's a little further south on the map, but as far as access, it's a pretty straight shot, whether you're on 540 or 55 going south. There's available seats there. It's a long-time year-round school that we've had, and that would be our next recommended option. So it all hinges on your calendar discussion and what may happen with Austin Ridge Elementary School. Okay, if Austin Ridge stays multi-track year-round, then I feel to be fully utilized, they would need an application area. Okay, but if Austin Ridge goes traditional, then that just throws it off the table for this right here. You see? So that's a discussion we'll have with you guys about that.
And so this is not a question for you to answer today, but this is part of what we would need to know in making
Yes.
all those decisions.
Yes.
Once Horton Creek opens, once E50 opens, is there capacity in that area that Austin Ridge could potentially become traditional,
Right.
or does that
Right.
capacity not even exist? So we would
Right.
have to know that.
Right.
And to
Yeah, Chris.
piggyback on that, I've also heard concerns in that area about middle school capacity. So does Austin Ridge Middle School, can we afford or not afford, but do we need more capacity? And do we need a 4-track year-round middle school in that area, given we have Carpenter and Austin Ridge? Maybe we need those to stay 4-track year-round. So I think the calendar for the middle school needs to be a point of discussion as well.
In conjunction with
In
the fact
conjunction
that
with
we
all
have
of this,
other year-round middle schools that we're struggling to keep full, so it all has, in that western area, so we have to look at all of that.
I would agree.
So you've got several conversations going on parallel here, and
Right.
we talk to each other, long-range planning, so.
But that's what I'm sitting here thinking too, is again, where in this process do we determine if we're needing a policy change about what kids get automatic, not automatic, but preferred options into a year-round school if they're in a tradition? Because we keep bringing that up, but we never really address it. And that plays into this. Is a policy committee, is a facilities committee, is it work, where do we, and are we needing to do that before we answer the very question you're asking?
I don't believe anywhere in policy we have a guarantee, we
Well,
say
that's
anything
why I
about.
said that's a practice.
Yeah, I think it's all practice.
So it's a facilities question.
So staff needs to give some thought to where that needs to come for us to try to resolve it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so you'll see this chart on each of the new school slides, so just go over it once with you. This is the school calendars, the YR is the multi-track year-round, TR is traditional. So this column, 15, 16, ADM, this is the utilization that was reported to DPI based on month 2 ADM. The middle column here, 16, 17 SPR. This was as of July 19th for the start of this school year. This is what the utilization was. And then if all of the base students attended the base, this is what the utilization would be. So as you can see, that explains why we would need to have Hortons Creek open in this area.
And again, just to confirm that the 16-17 column is a projection based on July data, knowing that in one of these cases, the school's already in, and I think that number might be different.
Oh, Austin Ridge Elementary
Through the roof.
is our most crowded elementary school ever. We confirmed that. And the principal and the staff, they're doing a really great job keeping it all going out there.
1,300.
Yes.
This is only your
1,300.
second year as a multi-track school.
Right, right. Relief, though, is
On the
just
way.
around the corner. Right. Okay.
Okay, so before we look at the proposed attendance area, to show you how we talked about thinking ahead, and we gave these different scenarios to what's going to happen in the future, what's coming down the pipe. So in 1920, we'll have E50 as well as M16 opening. And so we use these scenarios to help us plan for draft one. So you can see how the outline in red is the current attendance areas for these schools. And then you'll see that as we go into the next slide where we show our proposed attendance area for Hortons Creek. So this is a before and after map. These are the current attendance areas, and these are the proposed ones. Outlined in yellow is Hortons Creek. And I want to just point out this horn that's kind of sticking out here from the Mills Park attendance area. If I can go back and show you the long-term thinking of this. That section right there is not going to stay at Mills Park proposed long-term. So that's why we're not recommending to move it now if we're planning on potentially moving it later. So we wanted to just explain that and show that was our thinking when we kept that piece on there.
So that's an E50 target.
Well,
It'll
it's
go
That's
to
a Carpenter
Carpenter.
target with E50 open. Okay. all right.
Okay. One more thing I'd like to say, if you back up, because this is year 3 of the multi-year plan, these base attendance areas are starting to fit together like puzzle pieces now. It just works so much easier, and when you go from the elementary over to the middle, when we come to you with M16, it's already going to be in place. And parents will be expecting, oh yeah, we'll probably go to M16. So I'm really happy with the work that Mike Miller and his team has done at ORAD.
Okay, so the response from your February retreat, you asked us to take a look at academic proficiency data, and we've done that. You'll see that in the next couple slides. What we used was 14-15 EOG reading scores, and it's based on students residing in the base. Now we know the 15-16 scores have come out, but we haven't had time to put them in the presentation, so that's why we're using 14-15 for now. So the academic proficiency data, this is the actual scores from 14-15 that were reported. Alston Ridge at 71%, Mills Park at 87%. Now, if all the base attended the base, this is the before and this is the after based on the draft attendance area. So before, 85% was proficient in Alston Ridge and 86% at Mills Park. After, when we add in the attendance area for Hortons Creek, it's now 82, 88, and 86 for Hortons Creek.
Of course, the reason we use base attends base is because while we may have actual data for the year that's already occurred, you don't know what choices families are going to make based on all the choices that we offer the district. So the better comparison to use is base-base.
Now moving to Rogers Lane Elementary. Now again, planning ahead, we had thought about this attendance area when we opened Beaver Dam in 16-17. So this school is going to open as a traditional calendar with a proposed calendar option of Lake Myra Elementary. It has a planned capacity of 780. The potential impact area is Barwell Road, which is a track 4 only school. Hodge Road Elementary, which is also track 4 only, and the school actually lands right in the Hodge Road attendance area. And Hodge Road currently has an enrollment cap for the 16-17 school year. Knightdale Elementary, which is traditional, and Walnut Creek, which is a track 4 only school, which also has an enrollment cap for the 16-17 school year. And again, just looking at these numbers, if all the base attended the base, again, we'd be in trouble here, so that's why we need to open another new school. So the before and after photos here, the hashed out areas are the intended target areas. You see outlined in yellow, Rogers Lane here as part of Hodge Road, part of Barwell, and part of Walnut Creek attendance areas. And then there's this little section here that was Knightdale, that was on the west side of 540 that we moved into the Hodge Road base attendance area out of Knightdale. And that's just due to having, you know, a man-made structure in there as the boundary. Looking at the academic proficiency, again, that same chart, the before and after numbers. Before, we had a range of 36% all the way up to 40%. And then after, that range becomes 36% to 42%. Related middle school and high school changes?
Hold on.
Yep.
I hesitate to even, this may just be a rhetorical. But obviously, several of those schools are out in my area, Keith has some, Nika or any of them in your area. Most of our population is going to celebrate when they see the map earlier that showed the very few places that are impacted. Other areas are going to say, why aren't we doing more to balance this out? If you look at these numbers for East Raleigh and Eastern Wake County compared to what we see in the west. Connie, that may just be a rhetorical question. I think I know the answer because of distances and everything else that are involved. But that is something that as a board member I am asked frequently.
And just a comment on that. I mean, I share the question, but when we did a lot of maps, you did some maps, I did some maps, in between here and Western Wake is Central Raleigh where all our magnet schools are. And the reality is we actually have balanced reasonably effectively, not perfectly, but reasonably effectively there. And so effectively all of Raleigh is the balancing of those two ends. The further you get out on the ends, the harder it is to get any balance.
It's hard,
So I think that's,
we still have to keep bringing it up.
we have to keep bringing it up, and we have to keep working at other things to frankly encourage development and jobs in this area.
And to make sure that we have the programs in these schools that are needed from the equity
Absolutely.
standpoint, and recognizing that there are kids and parents in this that are needing help.
Yes.
Which is a funding issue.
No,
There's a lot of
I
things.
raise it not at all to diminish this, I don't want us to damage a fragile.
It's a comment.
Yeah,
I'm glad you raised the issue.
I am too.
it's an important
We
issue.
have to address it.
So going to related middle school and high school changes. Hortons Creek, we're not recommending any changes for middle school due to M16 opening as we discussed earlier. Rogers Lane Elementary, we do have some recommended changes due to River Bend Middle School opening, and we'll go into that in the next few slides. And again, no recommended high school changes at all. So the last new school, River Bend Middle School, is going to open as traditional calendar. The calendar option proposed to be Rollsville Middle School. It has a planned capacity of 1,264 and a potential impact area of Durant Road Middle, East Millbrook Middle School, East Wake Middle School, Rollsville Middle School, because the school lies in the base attendance area of the current Rollsville Middle area, and Wendell Middle School. And then again, as we had touched upon earlier with the district-wide impact map, we're looking at improving the operational efficiency and proximity in this particular area as well. And again, just looking at if all of the base attended the base, again, here, you'll see that information. So here are the before and after maps. The hashed out areas here, over in the west, that is the River Bend Middle School proposed attendance area. And then here, we've got East Wake Middle School and Wendell Middle School. Okay? And so the elementary schools that would feed to each of these three middle schools, for River Bend Middle School, we'll have River Bend Elementary, Beaver Dam Elementary, and Rogers Lane Elementary, part of it. East Wake Middle School will have the Nightdale schools will be assigned to that school, so we'll have Nightdale Elementary, Forestville Elementary, Lockhart Elementary, and Hodge Road Elementary. And then for Wendell, we'll have the Wendell schools, Lake Myra, Wendell Elementary, and Carver Elementary.
Ms. Kushner, are you trying to ask a question?
I am. I think I appreciate seeing this map because a lot of the feedback we got at the Nightdale work group was concerning that middle school map. So I appreciate that staff took, that this has been, the community also knows that this has been a couple of years in the making to address these issues. So I'm glad to see them today.
Also know there's some layers to this middle school map. In 2007, when we converted 22 schools to add capacity, a lot of those schools were in eastern Wake County. Through the years, because of the recession, the growth didn't happen as fast. We went from multi-track back to track 4. And now when in your year-round study we've been talking about the track 4 schools, that the 2 areas of the county where we have track 4 schools, there really isn't a demand for year-round schools. So that configuration on the left came about when we were trying to align elementary calendars with middle school calendars. And it created those odd-looking attendance areas. Thinking ahead about your calendar discussion, we felt like let's get some better efficiency going on here, better utilization, and rather than line up calendars, let's line up elementary schools to the middle school and then go from there. And it certainly does make for a more efficient area. It brings proximity for some of these families that didn't have it. It brings a lot of things in place now. So that's definitely why we included it in this presentation.
Looking at the academic proficiency, so the before and after percentages range from 42 to 60. And again, the after, if all the base attended the base, we're looking at a range of 43 to 66.
And I have a clarifying question. Of these schools, East Millbrook is a magnet, and is Wendell Elementary is a magnet, but not Millbrook.
Right.
So does do these alignment changes allow for some magnet capacity at East Millbrook so they'd be able to expand their magnet seats?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I think that's going to be important.
Definitely.
So Riverbend Middle School.
What is the white hole there above East Millbrook? What other school does that represent?
Wildwood Forest.
Middle school.
No,
On the
so
middle school map.
Oh, the middle school map?
That one.
Other side.
Mike, do you know off the top of your head? It's Wakefield.
Wakefield, okay, all right, thank you.
And there's actually 2 of those little white areas.
Yeah. That's Carnage.
That's Carnage.
Uh-huh. It's Carnage.
Okay, so with Riverbend Middle School opening as traditional calendar, and as we said, the entire base of Beaver Dam, which is traditional, Riverbend Elementary, which is multi-track year-round, and Hearts of Rogers Lane being traditional calendar, being assigned to Riverbend Middle School, we'd like to make the recommendation that Riverbend Elementary convert to traditional calendar.
What's their current enrollment?
We're under enrolled. Riverbend Elementary.
We've been managing enrollment for this.
They're at 65, 62.5 planned capacity. That's on a multi-track. Remember, we opened Beaver Dam last year, which
So their number, the number of kids there is?
the number of kids at Riverbend, 627 as of today.
All right, so as a single track, they should be able to handle 790 in that model, 780 in that
780.
model.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you've been working with the Facilities Committee and the year-round calendar study. And so this slide just goes into, thinking ahead about some of those potential recommendations down the road. Here are the 2 maps here. They have the same color coding. The blue is the traditional base attendance areas. The yellow is the year-round multi-track attendance areas. The orange is the track 4 only attendance areas, and the red is the modified calendar attendance areas.
And the
So-
east, that red is Carver, correct?
Over here?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
Carver.
Yep. and
Yeah.
there's
Partnership.
And Partnership has a small base.
Uh-huh. And then the middle schools is Centennial and Moore Square.
Just clarification of language, all of these are showing base attendance areas.
Yes.
Not draw areas, but base attendance areas. It's the same, this is your base, it's all about the base. Okay.
So we put a little goal up there. This of course is subject to change. But as you look at your year-round schools, possibly make recommendations for any of the track 4 schools in the 18-19 school year, and anything for the multi-track schools in the 19-20 school year. That's just a goal, and it certainly can change whatever you'd like us to do. Okay?
Okay. So operational efficiency, and actually transportation brought this to our attention. Specific example with Salem Elementary. So these are for schools with satellite base attendance areas. Not the base that's directly around the school. These are satellite areas that are away from the base of the school. So Salem, they contact us, and you see they have one student who rides the bus to go to Bauckham Elementary, and 8 that go to Scotts Ridge Elementary. So what we did was we looked at all of the schools that had 2 calendar options in elementary, that also had satellite-based attendance areas, and we looked for inefficiencies to see if there's any suggestions we could make. And these are the ones that we've come up with. As you can see in red, this would be the affected students. So we're looking to make some recommendations there to help. And again, this is only for the satellite-based attendance areas.
And you'll see that in the red, there are very few students that are impacted, but it will provide some efficiencies of transportation that makes sense, and the families will still have an option.
So the proposal is to eliminate the red and just have the one choice for the satellite area only. For the base around the school, the 2 choices make sense. But for the satellite area, 2 choices does not make sense.
The base around the school, it's fairly split, or do we even there have multiple buses going into the same neighborhoods?
Well, we do have multiple buses going into the same neighborhood, but for the last 2 years, we've been bringing you recommendations of the lesser used choice, and we're pretty much down to choices that families are using. Okay?
And because it's a more confined geographical area, it doesn't stress the transportation as much.
And then this section at the bottom, this would have to do with the potential of Riverbend Elementary going traditional. If that is the case, you've got Riverbend Elementary is the calendar option for Wildwood Forest. So we would recommend removing that. But then adding Harris Creek as the calendar option for Riverbend if it was traditional. So looking at overcrowded schools, particularly CAP schools. These are the CAP schools for elementary, middle, and high school for the 16-17 school year. And again, in December, Christina Lighthall and facilities, they'll be making recommendations at whether to keep the cap or remove the cap for specific schools.
And you'll ultimately see that the 3 new schools we're opening this year really help with some of these schools with enrollment caps. So.
We just want to make sure we have our 16-17 enrollment data before we go down that road.
Just having a cap does not mean the school is not accepting students.
Right.
Correct.
A cap has been set in place. When they get to that number, then the school has to
Correct.
turn students away.
And I certainly want to particularly highlight the Mills Park Elementary situation and how that will be relieved by Hortons Creek, and we're celebrating that.
Okay, so this next slide, this is a bring back from last year's assignment plan. This section here of Conn Elementary was proposed to move to Underwood, and we're not recommending to do it for the 17-18 school year. We still understand it's going to be done, just not yet. We're recommending because of the continued crowding at Underwood. So we're asking to hold off on that for at least another year until we
We are
get the
keeping
crowding.
an eye on the development that's going on in Con space.
Okay. So another thing that we had gotten to look into was Lincoln Heights Elementary. So in the southern area, we're looking to balance the utilization of the schools in this area. You've got Herbert Akins, Fuquay Elementary, which currently has an enrollment cap for 16-17. Holly Grove Elementary, which currently has an enrollment cap for 16-17. Lincoln Heights and Willow Springs. And if you look at if the base attended the base, actually first let's look at the current utilizations. You can see that some of these schools are overcrowded, but you have one school in that area that's not being utilized fully. So what we did was we started to plug in E45 and E35. Here's E45 and E35. And so when those potentially come on, did we want to do a two-phase movement here of students? So considering these two new schools opening, did we want to move potentially some students into Lincoln Heights now that will eventually move in later when we open these two new schools? So we wanted to put that up for discussion as well to get some of your feedback.
I think another factor to consider for 17-18 anyway is that Lincoln Heights is undergoing a major renovation. And so they will lose some capacity as they are staging areas. And if you were to look at the current number of students based on when they begin to stage and they lose classrooms, they will technically be more crowded based on the space that's available. So that's why we were sort of on the fence around whether to actually include a recommendation to change the base attendance area or to wait until, number one, we're opening other schools in the area and the complete renovation is done. So that's another point for feedback that we'll want from the board.
And refresh us on the dates of the switch lines renovation?
When will Lincoln Heights be ready?
When is Lincoln Heights completed?
1 year, another year.
In 2018.
Yeah. It'd be the next year's plan.
So what will be the capacity when it's least, when it's most involved in the reconstruction? I realize we've got a number of mobile units there we're using for classrooms now.
I have to get back to you on that. I don't remember us adding a whole lot of seats there, but
I think he's asking about during the construction.
Oh,
What is the lower?
What is the lowest capacity during construction of the facility?
I don't have that with me.
Okay.
Were there other hands that I didn't see?
Okay.
Susan?
I was just going to make a comment that I'm certainly glad to see that we're talking about how to rebalance down in this area, but just as a comment, it makes sense to me to align it with the opening of the new schools in 2018. At least E45 will open that year. Isn't that correct? Buckhorn Creek, and then having the new Lincoln Heights reconstructed building ready for occupancy. That seems like good timing for us to start planning ahead for how we can redistribute for 18-19.
Ms. Johnson?
I echo those sentiments. I mean, I know this is a bring back when we've talked about this. But given there is going to be physical transition at the school, it is definitely my preference to talk about us waiting until it's aligned with the opening of the new schools and it's a finished facility.
So grandfathering. So stability is one of the pillars of policy 4100, but again, we're opening new schools, so some students will need to move. The grandfathering that we'll keep in place that is the same that we've used the last several years, okay? But I just wanted to stress that no district transportation will be provided for students who choose to grandfather, okay? Again, it'll be different when you're reassigned from an existing school to an existing school as it is when you're opening a new school. But again, transportation will not be provided for students who grandfather because they'll be considered transfer students at that point. And then coming back to the district-wide impact maps, again, Hortons Creek and Rogers Lane, and these are the only two areas that are affected, the elementary level. Middle school, just these particular areas here. Again, nothing for high school. So community feedback.
And for new schools, we grandfather just rising fifth graders. Can you remind me?
Fourth and fifth.
Rising fourth and fifth graders.
And their siblings.
And their siblings.
Eighth.
And eighth
For
for
middle
middle
school.
school.
Right. We're
And
not
then
opening a new
siblings.
high school, but
Right.
the elementary and the middle.
Just wanted to.
And then existing to an existing, all
It's all
current grades.
Right.
can
But with- And
grandfather.
both without transportation.
Right.
Yeah, just
Right.
wanted to
Yeah.
get that straight.
So community feedback
Oh, don't say.
is launched already, and we'll be getting community feedback
Thank you.
online. Public information sessions will be held at the BAC meetings through September, and public information sessions about Draft 2 will be near the schools in the affected areas. And we'll put that information out on the website once we have the locations and dates set.
So, the feedback form is already open online,
That's correct.
and I would assume is there the link where a parent can put in their address and see if they were affected?
Yes. We had a little delay. We were hoping we would make it, but we did. It's up. They can put in their address and check and see if they're affected. It's up and ready to go. Did Glenn tell you we have some additional stuff in the addendum? Skip ahead. We have very detailed maps online, so if you want to look at streets and neighborhoods, that's in the addendum. We've got the 7-year plan that the facilities team has been working on is in the addendum. It's a little more detailed than what we showed at the beginning of this presentation. And we have the details of policy 4100 in the addendum. Okay?
Just backing up to the timeline again. And as we get specific dates for the timeline, we'll share those with you and give you the updated timeline.
We can tell you that a goal would be to bring the next draft at the first board meeting in October, and then the third draft at the first board meeting in November, but, you know, of course, we'll have a shift, possibly depending on what the feedback looks like.
All right, good enough. Jim?
Appreciate the work. One comment I'm curious about, we've been calling this draft, or year 3 of a 3-year plan. I think, of a 4-year plan. I think I'm seeing, and I very much appreciate it, that we're adopting the rolling strategy like we've done for the capital plan. And so I guess my question to all of us on the board is, do we want to, is this a time certain plan, or should we not change our vocabulary and just consider this a rolling assignment plan, very much like we're doing our capital plan? It'll need some better name than what I've just given, but it feels a little bit strange to me, because the question then is, okay, so what's going to happen then after they're done with this?
Year, right?
Yeah.
I would
So
so
I just
agree, Jim.
offer that.
Yeah.
So maybe we can just change our vocabulary a little bit.
And I had forgotten that it was year 3.
Yeah.
Well,
Year 3 of infinity.
Year 3 of a multi-year approach. That's what the title
But
says.
not- But initially it was tied to 4 years of CIP.
So to answer a question from earlier, current enrollment at Lincoln Heights is between 450 and 460. Their reduced capacity during the staging could possibly go as low as 515.
All right, we're pretty much on schedule. Does anybody have a pressing question other than Mr. Sutton, who's getting ready to ask us? Big friend of yours.
Yeah, my pressing question, and it is a pressing issue, I think, and if we could go back to slide 21. Just looking at the academic proficiency on the schools on Rogers Lane, and I want to do more than just kind of raise the issue. I just really, and three of those schools, Barwell Road, Hodge Road, Walnut Creek, Rogers Lane, are in my district. The other 2 are stone's throw away. Those 3 schools, after the changes, all would be under 40% in terms of reading proficiency in those 3 schools. And I just find that to be unacceptable. We looked at a couple of slides just before that, at Hortons Creek, and all of those were in the 70s and 80s. We didn't really sort of blink an eye. I've seen where we were less accepting of changing the cleaning schedule at a school, but then sort of see this slide, raise the issue, keep going. I would like to hear more about, and maybe this is not the time for that here in this conversation as we're talking about assignment, but I think, again, as I'll continue to say, we need to be a little bit more intentional about schools like when we're in this shape, and of course we're getting ready to open one, Rogers Lane, that does that school then come into the elementary support model based on academic proficiency here? I mean, what's the plan? What are we going to do? And not just staff, but also as a board. What are we going to do where we say this is not acceptable? Let's go back and figure out a plan or a strategy to make sure that this is not the case. These students cannot wait on more jobs or more economic development or what have you in the area. These are kids that are hurting right now. So
are you asking what can be done assignment-wise to
not
balance it
assignment-wise,
out,
just
or program-wise?
comprehensively. Again, this may not be the place for the conversation right now, since we're talking about assignment. If it's student achievement or if it's something larger, I know we don't have the time, and this may not be the forum right here. I get that. But I don't want to just kind of, the slide comes by, we see 3 schools under 40% reading proficiency, and we just kind of.
Because we raised that a couple of years ago, Pool Road, but that was put off being built because of some issues. But we said at that time, Rogers Lane was going to have the same situation. Mr. Gill?
I think Mr. Sutton's point's well taken. Today's discussion is on opening 2 new schools. I don't think it's an issue where staff has to come to the board with suggestions. I think it is an issue that the board has to schedule time to look at soon in terms of how we look at these schools, either through assignment and or other types of remediation, other comprehensive ideas. But I think it's the board's responsibility to do that and to get it scheduled instead of just kicking it down the road.
Right, my plea is with the board, it's not with staff.
Right.
It's with the board. That we be more intentional about seeing information presented to us by staff and say at that point that this is unacceptable and that we need to do something about that, both as a board and staff and leadership team. So this is not critical of pointing the finger at anyone or group or what have you.
Right.
Staff has brought us the information. But when I sit here again and sort of see or watch us kind of, and I know nobody's just saying it's okay, I'm not suggesting that. But like I said, I've seen us be more an accepting of, like I said, changing when we vacuum the floors and sweep floors at school. That this right here should have everybody boiling mad.
Well taken. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. We need to adjourn this and move to our regular session.